Welcome to the DIY Goalie Podcast, where hosts and goalie coaches Nathan Park and Connor Monday share their insights on how to become a better goalie. Goalies, welcome back to another episode of the DIY Goalie Podcast presented by True North Goaltending. It is just me today, Nathan Park, as your host. Connor is not around kind of last minute today, so we're going to fly solo. But we are going to be, now that we're kind of winding down on the season, we are going to be looking at hopefully bringing on a couple guests in the near future. We're also going to actually work on building ourselves a bit of a runway of episodes so that once the season kind of hits next year, we don't have to be scrambling so much on episodes some of these days. But hopefully you guys are doing well. Again, as always, thank you for tuning in to our little show here. It's still kind of crazy that we're now into three figures into our 100th episode after our last week, and this one's 101. So again, we appreciate all of you. Today, I kind of wanted to go through a bit of a topic that's, a bit of a hot button issue these days when it comes to hockey. I haven't played in a little less than 10 years. It's been about 8 years since I finished my career playing college. And since then, like 8 years really isn't that long of a time, but my goodness, has the landscape of hockey changed drastically since then, at least here in Canada for sure. I can't really speak to other regions, but I know we're in Western Canada, but I know obviously Ontario has gone through a drastic amount of change. And you can argue whether or not it's for the better, for the worse. I think there's arguments for both sides. There's pros and cons to kind of how things are starting to shape up in the hockey landscape these days. But the one thing that I kind of wanted to talk about today was related to coaching and kind of that balance between when is it too much coaching. The one thing that, well, there's lots of things, but kind of one of the big things that that is really unique to the generation of athletes that are playing these days is kind of our whole societal landscape. Like you look at, yes, social media was around when I was growing up and playing, but it was a little bit, in its infancy. It's not nearly as or wasn't really as widespread as it is now. The way we consume content as well nowadays is drastically different. So, the shorts, like you got your YouTube shorts, you got TikTok, all of this stuff. Like we've talked about it lots of times on the podcast about how little we actually have goalies and just hockey players in general, and probably athletes in other sports as well, just not sitting down and watching games. Not kind of getting that sort of, that sort of exposure. Everybody kind of wants the quick hitters, like what's the highlight? What's, what was the big goal from last night or the big save or the big hit? What can I consume in 10 seconds or less and all of that. So obviously we're seeing, declines in attention spans and other kind of cognitive development issues stemming from that. But the thing that I've also kind of noticed has shifted, and in one sense it's a good thing, but in another sense maybe not so much, is how much of a focus there is on development and how much we're kind of exposing these young athletes to a lot of stuff that they weren't exposed to in, previous generations. Like when I played, and maybe this whole podcast episode will just be a big old man yells at cloud kind of moment, and maybe some of you will disagree with me heavily and tune me out, and that's okay. But I figured it was a good discussion. But back when I played, at least around here, you went to your minor hockey association. You were tiered according to your evaluations. You played your season and then did it all the next season. When you got old enough, which was at the U15 level, like when I played, there was no AA or AAA stream here in Alberta for U13 and U11. Now there is. And you have the unsanctioned side of things, which is its whole other can of worms. But when I played, you played for your minor hockey association. You went to club if you were good enough at U15, played AA or AAA. And then basically when you aged out of minor hockey and the club stream, you either kind of went major junior or you went to junior A or junior B or whatever the case is. If you went the major junior route, you couldn't go NCAA. And now that has recently changed. But, you know, we didn't have a lot of the extras. Like we didn't really have a lot of goalie development during the season. We kind of went to a goalie camp in the summer. There wasn't a lot of, like, we did dry land like stuff, like some strength or conditioning stuff, like away from the rink as well, but that wasn't happening very often. A lot of the extras weren't really available. Like, you know, people didn't really talk about going to see sports psychologists. People didn't really talk about, you know, like the mental prep side of things. There wasn't anything related to like cognitive training, not really much in terms of, you know, increasing your hand-eye coordination, or I should say improving your hand-eye coordination. You know, there was some information on stuff like nutrition and sleep and hydration and all of that, but wasn't very, you know, widespread, wasn't very detailed and all of that. And nowadays, you basically have somebody who's an expert in like every facet of the game, which is good. Like knowledge is good. The ability to pull from a wealth of resources is obviously great for development. But we have gotten to a point that I've kind of started to wonder if we're almost over coaching or overexposing some of our young athletes to a lot of this stuff and potentially kind of creating like some overwhelming, you know, feelings for our young athletes and kind of potentially leading to more burnout, more stress, more resentment, and kind of losing a lot of that, you know, childhood fun. Like, I mean, I know when we were playing, you know, it was like, oh, let's go to the ODR for 4 or 5 hours with your buddies and just, you know, take 2-on-1s and breakaways all day, have a little scrimmage with whoever else is out there. You know, we used to like go throw a football around, go, you know, kick the soccer ball around, played, like I personally played out in ball hockey. I played soccer. I did a few other sports along the way. And as much as I wish that I got more goalie specific development when I was playing, like I wish I had consistent coaching like throughout my hockey season and all of that stuff. The nice thing was there was a separation. Like, yes, when I got to the higher levels and played at the elite levels, there's obviously pressure, like pressure to perform, pressure to be consistent, to, you know, do the things on and off the ice well on a consistent basis. But there was also a separation from that pressure. The season was over. You could take some time to yourself. You could recoup. You could regenerate. Do what you needed to do with that. And it almost built kind of that love for the game, that desire to kind of come back. Like even after my junior career was done, I kind of told myself that if I didn't get any NCAA looks for Div 1, that I was going to call it a career there. And so after my junior career was done, I got a couple offers from some state schools that were ACHA Div 1 or NCAA Div 3. But I just didn't want to spend the crazy amounts being an quote unquote international student from Canada, paying like 20 some $1,000 US a year. So I just decided I had enrolled at, a college in my hometown, kind of in Edmonton, and just decided that's what I was going to do. But a month or two into the off season, I got the itch again, and I'm just like, you know what, I want to play again if I can. So I called the coach. There was another third goalie spot open, so they brought me on board, and I played another 2 years. And I think some of that gets kind of lost these days. I think there's a lot of young athletes that are kind of losing that love for the game because of how much, we're doing. Like, we're doing year-round hockey, we're doing nutrition calls, we're doing sports psychologist meetings, we're doing cognitive training stuff, we're doing on ice stuff. Like, there's people out there that are going to 6 a.m. goalie practices before school, and then they go do their team practice after school, and maybe they do a personal workout at the gym after that or before that or whatever. And although, yes, this sort of stuff is good for the development, at some point it does become to be a little bit too much, though. And I'm going to kind of, as we go, I'm going to narrow the focus of this conversation more and more. But in general, I think just how much we're doing and how much we're exposing our kids to, I feel like can almost be a little bit of a detriment, right? I've been talking lots with some goalies this year that I've been working with when we're doing like our mentorship calls and kind of discussing this sort of stuff. Like, there's goalies that are telling me, well, I've seen things or I've been told things that I should be doing this. Like, I have to be doing this, but it's not working for me. Like, I have a goalie that I've been working with that is just like, he's told me that I've tried the visualization and I just can't picture it. I do the 5 senses where I try and, make it so I can hear, I can see, I can taste, I can feel like what's going on. And it doesn't work for me. I just find I don't benefit from it. Like, I don't feel like it's getting me any further, but I feel like I need to be doing it because everybody is saying that visualization is such a good tool. And I was kind of telling him, I'm like, well, if it doesn't work for you, like, that's the biggest thing, is you need to find what works for your game in your approach. And like, I think sometimes when we have 10 different angles and 10 different experts kind of in our ears and telling us, to do certain things, like, believe me, I am 100% on board with getting a sports psychologist and somebody you can kind of talk to about that sort of stuff. Like, tons of tips and tricks and tools that we can use to be better with our mental approach in our game from them. Great way to get reset techniques and all of that stuff. But at the same time, sometimes it can be overwhelming, or it can like basically give us an approach that doesn't work. So when I was talking to this goalie, I kind of told him how I visualized. And I said, because I didn't know any better, I didn't use any senses. I just kind of, would take, like, in my mind of clips that I've seen of myself making big saves or routine saves, I would kind of play those over. And then I'd kind of translate that to almost feeling like my body's doing it, or I would even maybe make small kind of phantom movements with my hands to, simulate making the save as I kind of played it through in my mind, right? Or sometimes I would even just use clips themselves of me playing as kind of my quote unquote visualization, right? But there's going to be people where the approach to visualization just as a whole doesn't work. And there's also going to be a lot of these things that people are giving you as tips or tricks that aren't going to work for you. And it's just as important to drop something that isn't working for you as it is to make something that is working for you part of your routine. And trying to force something that just isn't clicking because you think it's the right thing to do is not the way to kind of maximize our development. The other thing too, like as we kind of narrow down more and more kind of specifically to on ice, we kind of see a similar thing going on when it comes to our approach to on ice development. There are a lot of coaches out there, and I know I've been guilty of this as well, trying to kind of do a better job of this. But I find, especially in the goalie community, and I don't know if it's because we are so kind of analytic generally, or if it's because, we have such a unique position that is kind of lonely that we might kind of get caught up in our thoughts a little bit more, or kind of try and analyze ourselves a little bit more, because historically there hasn't been that support system for goalies most of the time. But we tend to hammer so much home on technique and on these smallest little details, and to the point that sometimes we can drive ourselves crazy with it, right? Like we're trying to refine the littlest things. We're trying to find the littlest things, to analyze everything, to try and find the next leg up, the next advantage over the other goalie, that I find sometimes we kind of get lost in the bigger picture, the whole like can't see the forest through the trees type deal. I find that we're starting to see almost a bit too much of a swing, I think, on the overcoaching side of things. Sometimes, a lot of times actually, like having the ability to just improvise and just let things happen and kind of let our goalies, our athletes learn from their own mistakes is way more beneficial than having somebody constantly in their ear and breaking everything down for them, especially since that also kind of creates a bit of a reliance, right? Like we want to build our goalies to be able to solve their own problems. And if they constantly have somebody there solving the problem for them, saying, hey, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, blah, 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 they're not going to be able to, get to that higher level of being able to analyze themselves and figure out where their own breakdowns are, right? We deal with lots and lots of goalies at high levels, like, U18, AAA, AA goalies, U15, AAA, AA goalies, that we do video breakdowns with them. And it's kind of like, okay, what did you see here? Why did we make this decision? And I don't mean to make this sound bad, but there's some times where some of the answers we get kind of make you scratch your head and you're just like, well, that doesn't make like any sense at all, right? So I think sometimes taking a step back is actually the better approach than trying to hop right into it. Letting our goalies be able to kind of develop themselves. Like one of our philosophies at True North Goaltending, the thing that I joke lots with when I bring new coaches on board and talk about kind of our approach to coaching is I basically say, like, I want to make our job obsolete. Like I want to get to the point that the goalies we work with can make their own assessments. They can understand their own breakdowns. Like in my ideal world, I work with the goalie that we do a goalie session and I basically don't have to say a word except go or, nice save or whatever the case is, right? Because when they do something and there's a breakdown, they can be like, I should have had my hand out, or I should have rotated better, or I should have, set my feet earlier, or I didn't shoulder check and I missed where the backside guy was, or whatever the case is. And kind of the phrase that I've been running with for this is structured chaos. And I think having an approach of structured chaos where, yes, we obviously have a purpose in our development, we'll make it easy and we'll just talk about like a single goalie session. So yes, we want to have an approach for that single goalie session. We want to have a goal in mind as to what we're working on. We want to have kind of a plan as to how we're going to work on that, whether it's you're talking about our drills, whether you're talking about kind of the discussions that you want to have or the points you want to hit that we're really focusing on for the goalies. We need that structure to get anything out of our development sessions. But on top of the structure, we need a little bit of chaos, especially when it comes to hockey. Like the game of hockey is so chaotic and so random. Like I always kind of laugh at, the whole, it's the NHL script or, whatever. And I'm like, hockey's probably the absolute hardest sport to script because there's just way too much going on at any single time. You can't account for weird bounces off the boards. You can't account for a puck hitting 3 sets of shin pads and going in. Like just stuff like that is something that you can't really prepare for. You can try to recreate it in a session. You can try to, have a game plan going in, but it's it's the same thing as that Mike Tyson quote where it's like everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face, right? It's the same thing with hockey. Everybody has a plan until that puck hits 3 sets of shin pads. And then it's, oh my goodness, like, what do I do here? I didn't go through, last week's goalie session, spending 10 minutes on shots going off at 3 shin pads. So I think that we need to, as a goalie community, like goalie coaches, goalie parents, goalies in general, almost need to take a small step back on how much coaching that we're doing and how much we're really breaking down and analyzing the position. And we need to almost foster that creativity. We need to foster that that chaos, that randomness, the improvisation. We need to really like, that's one thing that, like, there's a couple things that separate the elite level goalies from the good goalies. And that's one of them is the ability to improvise and the ability to solve problems on the fly in real time as they happen. And I think one side effect from kind of this overcoaching approach that we've gotten to is that we have so many goalies that can't solve problems. They can't read the play. They don't know which decisions to make in certain situations. They either kind of get caught in between two things, or they make the wrong decision, or they just don't make a decision at all, and it ends up, not being a good outcome. So I think that we need a little bit of a shift in terms of how we approach goaltending. I know Connor absolutely hates the term like cookie cutter goalie or robotic goalie or whatever. And I totally agree. Like, there's a reason that there's a certain style that every goalie plays to an extent. Like, there's a reason why the butterfly is a thing. There's a reason why, we're teaching goalies to basically do the same things across the board to a certain extent. It's because of goalies playing the percentages and all that stuff. But there is a bit of a sense of like, it's become so scientific as opposed to an art now. And I think we need to bring back a little bit more of the art component of it and mix that in with the science approach, right? So yes, obviously we need to have, the analytical side of things where we see, okay, what gives us the best percentage to make a save? Where should we be in this situation? How can we maximize our coverage in the net? All of that is definitely needed. But I think the one thing that we've kind of lost a little bit in the goalie community is the ability to have that. But the 10% of the time that things really fall apart, how can we still manage to get something in front of the puck and then be able to recover back to a position of, being technically sound, right? We all know that in a game, nothing happens perfectly. Like we talked about, the chaos, the randomness. And so there needs to be times where we have to be able to deal with that and react to that. And I kind of tell my goalies this when I work with them. When it comes to the desperation stuff, like when we battle for pucks and whatnot, right? There is actually like certain ways to have desperation saves that can actually put you in better spots to still recover after that, right? We see it with young goalies a lot. The first thing they do after they make a save and there's a rebound that's coming back to the net right away is they basically lie down, right? Like, how many young goalies, their instinct is to dive? And the reason for that is because they still can't really move very well. They haven't been taught how to recover properly or to kind of carry their save through into their recovery. So a lot of times that panic sets in and they just like lay down or they just stick a paddle out or something like that. Obviously, again, the technical side, we can try and lead with our body more. We can try and smother the puck more with our hands. We can get a little bit of a rotation before we push or dive. All of that stuff is great. But then the art of it is being able to take that and translate it into the ability to just get something in front of the puck. Doesn't, like, at the end of the day, it doesn't actually really matter how that puck stays out as long as it does on a consistent basis. We've kind of conditioned ourselves to make it so that there's a specific way that we look for how we make our saves. And we kind of have dictated that there's a right and a wrong way to do it. But at the same time, there is an argument to be made for a goalie that does look like Dominic Hasek, who actually is stopping everything, versus a goalie that looks more like Connor Hellebuck, who's letting everything in. I've had conversations with coaches about this where they've been asking me opinions on the goalies. Like, maybe they're trying to choose one or two goalies from a pool of 3 or 4, say, like maybe final cuts or something like that. And they'll be like, well, this guy looks good, but he just doesn't stop a puck. Like, I just can't take him. Like, he can't stop a puck. But if you watch how he plays, he pushes to his spot, he gets set, his hands are out, he's tracking pucks, all of that stuff, but they just beat him. And that seems to, I don't want to say it's common, but I have noticed that a little bit recently with some of the goalies we've been working with, and kind of like being more involved now at some of the higher levels, working with some of the goalies that I do and some of the teams and organizations that I do. I do see a lot of that where, I shouldn't say a lot of that, but I do see a decent amount of that where there are goalies that technically you can tell they've had a lot of solid development, but they just can't stop a puck. And so I think we almost need to take a bit of a step back in how we approach our development and how much we're really coaching, and help put a little bit more art into the position, help goalies be able to problem solve and to improvise, put them in chaotic situations. Like I said, that structured chaos. That's kind of, I think, the best way that we can make the most well rounded goalies. We've seen a lot of criticisms lately about the state of goaltending in general. I see people all the time these days that are like, well, when's the last time we've seen a proper elite goalie? Like, do you remember the Patty Waws and the Marty Brodeurs of the day, the Dominic Hassicks, right? Even if you look at like kind of the 2010s era, I know he's still playing, but like Jonathan Quick, Henrik Lundqvist, Carey Price, Pekka Rinne. There's a lot of people that like to look on these goalies a little bit with rose-colored glasses. And I totally see why, because a lot of those goalies were able to have a little bit of that, improvisation mixed in with their technical ability. We talked about it on a previous episode, though. Like, the game has drastically changed in the last 5 years, even the last 2 to 3 years, compared to before. So I don't think it's as much of a goalie specific issue as it is a combination of things. But I do think there is a little bit of validity and a little bit of an argument to make that we might be seeing some kind of consequences to the overcoaching that's been happening. And, we almost like have a generation of goalies that are having troubles, being able to actually get in front of a puck and actually make a save, as opposed to just, well, coach told me to get here, and coach told me to put my hands here, and coach told me to, do X, Y, Z. So I did all those things. I checked every box he asked me to do, but the puck went in, right? And so I think, and trust me, I am a big proponent on the technical side of things. I'm very big on breaking it down for goalies and trying to help them understand, because that was something I didn't get growing up. I wish I did. Like, I ran through most of my career basically purely on athleticism. But that's also part of why I was as successful as I was because I had to figure out on my own a way to get in front of the puck. And I think we need to kind of incorporate a little bit more of that into our training and into our development with our goalies. Because like we're starting to see kind of a weird state of goaltending right now, because you have a combination of the player side of things really ramping up their specific development. We're seeing, analytics being a big thing, and teams starting to try and build more high danger chances. They're going for quality over quantity. We're seeing, maybe some kind of lingering effects of a poor support system for goaltending in general. In terms of like resources, and in terms of like how head coaches use their goalies in practice and all that stuff. So we're kind of in a weird spot where I think the high end, like if you talk about NHL goalies, they're all probably the best batch of athletes that we've ever had in terms of goaltending. And yet we have the lowest league average save percentage in the salary cap era. Like, I'm not convinced that if you put a guy like, I don't know, who's kind of your middle of the pack goalie that you would think of, I don't know, maybe if we went with like a Philip Grubauer, or, Darcy Kemper or something like that. Like those guys that are still good goalies, but they're not who you think of when you think of like the elite NHL goalies, kind of like, Vasilevsky, Connor Hellebuck, stuff like that. I still think that if you put a guy like that against, a guy like a Marty Brodeur or a Patty Waugh, the guys of today would be quote unquote better goalies, just because of the development that they've had and all that stuff. Like they're better athletes, they're stronger, they're quicker, all of that stuff, just because they've had a lot more training than the guys of the past have had. But again, more pucks are going in, right? The ability to improvise when things go wrong maybe isn't there like it used to be back in the day. So it's a weird state for goaltending right now as a whole. And I think a lot of people are way too quick to criticize goalies when it's just a shift in the game has made it so the game is a lot less favorable for goalies than it used to be. But I do also think part of our downfall right now too is that we're just so focused on the coaching, on the breaking down of the position, on the analytics side of things. And I think we do need to go back a little bit, take a little bit of a step back and kind of introduce a little bit more flow, a little bit more, randomness, a little bit more kind of just free for all type deal on top of the technical stuff that we need to break down. That's obviously an important piece, but yeah, I think in general we are overcoaching. I think the extent of it can be debated. Some people might argue that it's not too bad. I know definitely there are people out there that say it's way too much and we need to go back to the way of, half butterflies and whatever. But I think that's a bit of an extreme view as well. But just some food for thought, I guess, when you guys are going through your development stuff, introduce some structured chaos and work on the art of stopping a puck. At the end of the day, that's our job. That's literally what we have to do as goalies, is stop the puck. And sometimes it is that simple. It's not easy, but it is that simple sometimes. And sometimes we just got to do what we got to do to get that job done. And I think if you have the capability to do that when needed, and the other 90 to 95% of the time you are dialed in on the technical side of things, I think that's really what's going to help separate you and kind of take you to those higher levels. If you have that, 5 to 10% of improvisation to you. So that's kind of all I had. I know that was, a bit of a rambly episode. I kind of had a general idea and structure going in and kind of wung it, kind of improvised. So, I guess preaching my own words, or however you want to put it. But no, I appreciate you guys listening and tuning in. Hopefully that kind of made sense through the rambles. But again, goalies, we appreciate the listenership. It's kind of cool to see where all of you guys are coming from. If you do like the show, share it with a friend. If you can like or subscribe on the platform you guys are listening / watching on, that helps us out a lot as well. If you do want to check out kind of what we have to offer, we are getting very close to our new website getting ready to go. And we do have some other cool things that we're kind of working on in the background, but you can go take a look at our drills and our merch and some blog articles and all that stuff at truenorthgoaltending.com. If you want to kind of take a look at what we have going on in terms of updates on the company, or in terms of kind of some reels and stuff going on, we are going to be working on some content this off season. That's kind of one of the big check boxes that we're looking to do. You can head to True North Goaltending on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. On Instagram, we are YEG Goalie Coach. You can check us out. And yeah, we appreciate, like, any of that sort of stuff is free for you guys to do, but it does help us out a lot. It helps us kind of have more discoverability and get out to more goalies. Um, and and yeah, I think there's never really enough goalie content out there. We've kind of always gotten the short end of the stick as goalies. So we're going to try and help to bridge that gap. I know there's a lot of other people that are doing really good things on that front as well. But if you ever need to reach out, if you guys have a question you want on the podcast or anything like that, you can email us at goalies@truenorthgoaltending.com. Other than that, though, guys, appreciate you guys tuning in, and you guys keep making saves. Take care, goalies.